sharing now. So let's go. 5, 4, 3. Hey y'all, Walls here with your characteristics of nonfiction notes discussion. So in class, I asked my students to put their name at the top of their handout and then draw their favorite animal up there. Because if your favorite animal's on it, you have a drawing that you're proud of, you're not going to want to lose it, because we need to make sure that we have these notes handy at all times in our little nonfiction unit. We're going to read some nonfiction, and we're going to talk about what makes each particular passage that we read different. Because nonfiction is a huge umbrella, just like fiction. It's a huge category, very large umbrella that includes a lot of different types of writing. Nonfiction isn't just news articles and technical writing and fact. It's also a lot of personal opinion and lessons learned, that kind of stuff. So the way to read this chart is, think about, you've got your types there on the left: autobiography, biography, memoir. Let's kind of zoom in on this a little bit. Diary, journal, essays, and technical writing. And the farther down you go, the more reliant each is on facts. So down at technical writing, it says facts only with opinions, often in advertisements. But at autobiography at the top, all the way over here, it says personal opinions based on facts. So most nonfiction is a blend of fact and opinion. You just kind of pour more facts in or pour more opinions in based upon the type of writing you want to do. So when we read stuff, one way we can tell kind of what specifically we are reading is by looking at that. Okay, is the author stating a clear opinion? Is the author making a claim about something? Is the author using specific facts and statistics and quotes and analysis to support their opinion? Or is it just a list of things that happened? Or is it a discussion of how they feel? So I underlined autobiographical here because when we talk about an autobiography, that means it is a story of a person's life as told by that person. But not all, but some writing can be autobiographical, but not be an autobiography, like a diary, memoir, or journal. Those are autobiographical because they're written by the person about what's going on with that person, but they're not an autobiography. So we're going to focus on memoir here specifically, and essay for our first selection. So let's take a look at memoir. It's an autobiography that covers a certain period of time. There's not a lot of use of evidence. There's not a lot of support, but what is there is personal. So we're talking anecdotal. Anecdotal evidence is personal evidence you have for something versus like scientific or like objective evidence. First or third person is fine. Sometimes people write memoirs in the third person, and we'll see an example of how autobiographies can be written in the third person coming up. And now a memoir is a factual account of things. In class, we talked about how, what are some scenarios in which you would fact check a story your friend is telling you. Day to day, most of the time, we don't stop our friends when they're telling us a story and say, okay, well, show me evidence. You say you found $5 on the sidewalk walking home. Well, show me the exact $5 bill that you found and point me to the location where you found it. I need to see cameras and angles, and I need to see evidence, pics, or it didn't happen. We usually don't fact check all of the stuff that our friends tell us. We take it for granted, I guess. We kind of just take it as true. That's how memoirs work. Now, there have been instances in the past where people have written memoirs about a specific time in their lives, and they've gotten the facts wrong. Sometimes in a memoir scenario, and the author might be telling you something happened, and it didn't actually happen that way, but it's very personal. Not to get too far afield, but you can do some research into memory and how memory is very fallible. It's not perfect. So when we rely on people's memories to tell stories, sometimes how they recollect events isn't how they actually happened. So, but when we read memoirs, we generally take for granted that like what the person is telling us is true. Now, a memoir is different than a diary because a diary is it's much more personal, and it's a much more of a kind of a reaction to specific events. And then a journal takes that specific event kind of thing and puts the emphasis there. So, okay, that's where we're going to focus. Anyways, oh yeah, I'm sorry, we got to get to essays. That's what we're talking about. So when we look at Living Well, Living Good, we're going to see that the textbook refers to it as a memoir and an essay. So it has elements of a memoir. In it, the author, Maya Angelou, is telling us a story, but she's also trying to state an idea, an opinion. She's trying to convince us of something. And you see there that the purpose of an essay is to persuade or make an observation, and a combination in which facts are used to back up opinions. So Maya Angelou has some specific opinions on how we should live our lives, and she uses a story, more that memoir narrative type thing, to support it. Anyways, let's get going with the answers here. So we read this little piece called Democracy by James Russell Lowell. And there's your answers. You can see number one is C. This is an essay because the author here has a specific point he's trying to get across, and he's going to use facts and evidence to support it. So we talked about the very first sentence here. Democracy is nothing more than an experiment in government. That's kind of like the statement. That's the claim. And then the author uses a quote from Lincoln to support that claim. Now, notice there's also a quote here from somebody named Theodore Parker. You could be a history major. You could study history all day long, and you might encounter Theodore Parker in your studies. But generally speaking, especially at the high school level, like I never heard of Theodore Parker. So why do you think it's important that the author doesn't just use Theodore Parker? The author also uses President Lincoln in his defense to support his argument, or to kind of get the reader a clear understanding of what's going on. And, it's kind of like if you were to try to convince me that Norwegian death metal is the best kind of death metal, but then you start naming bands that I've never heard of. That's not helping you win your argument. So it's key here that when the author wants us to see his point, or he wants to support his point, he uses a quote from someone we have heard of. He uses evidence that is relevant to us. And we'll talk more about that later as we get into writing our own pieces. All right, so next you had the Education of Henry Adams by Henry Adams. That tells you right there, right off the bat, this is an autobiography. The Education of Henry Adams is an autobiography. Let's go to the answers real quick. Let's scale this down. So here are your answers: D, A, B, C, C. So it's an autobiography. It's different because the author refers to himself in the third person rather than writing it in first person. And then the clue here, the book about Henry Adams is written by Henry Adams. The key thing that we talked about in class is number 4 and 5. It says, which of the following could be a statement of the author's argument? Now, if you go back to the actual text, nowhere in here does the author say, like, this is my argument. This is the point that I'm trying to make. Here's the lesson that I want you to learn from this. But when you look at the details down here about the Beacon Street Boys, and you've got Savage and Marvin, and the few champions who would not run, the terrible Conky Daniel swaggered up, stopped a moment with his bodyguard to swear a few oaths at Marvin, and then swept on and chased the Flyers, leaving the few boys untouched who stood their ground. So it's not explicitly stated, the message, but it's there. And so the answer is C. Your enemy will respect you if you stand up to them. Keep in mind, nowhere in that particular passage did the author say, I want you to learn this lesson. Now, number 5, why does the author include details about which schools and groups made up the sides during the snowball fight? Now, the answer is C, but we talked about answer choice A here and the use of details. So when we, and we're going to get into our discussion of specific pieces, but when you are reading a memoir, the key details aren't always just to, prove a point or rather they're not, it's not the author saying like these details matter and you should pay very specific attention to them just because, all the details matter. It's, the details we include in writing like this are there to help maybe give the reader a clearer picture of what was happening at the time, or to aid in the delivery of our main message. The author had to make clear who was on whose side. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Who was on whose side there to better make that point that your enemy will respect you if you stand up to them. Okay, now this is I kind of did the continuum here. So when we're writing nonfiction, it's kind of a continuum. So you might have a memoir that is very narrative based over here, that is subjective support, or you might have an essay that is they have an opinion or a claim over here, and it's more objective support, fact checkable. And I think that's where we went with that. All right, cool. All right, guys, there's your elements of nonfiction notes. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Hope you guys have a good one. And make sure you check out the videos about Maya Angelou's Living Well, Living Good. I'll talk to you guys again soon.